2040, the year by which Governor Andrew Cuomo wants New York's electric sector to go entirely green. That is, to reduce carbon dioxide emissions in that sector to zero. This is the key new goal announced by the governor as part of the state's Green New Deal, and it follows other ambitious environmental targets previously established in the state's energy plan and REV, Reforming the Energy Vision. These prior plans also set targets to achieve a 40% reduction in greenhouse gases across all sectors of the economy by 2030, an 80% reduction by 2050, and to have 50% of electric energy produced by renewables by 2030. Are any of these targets realistic? Is New York State on pace to meet them? And what will it cost to do so? And how green is New York State anyway? We've got a ton of data points in our first ever episode on energy policy.
Welcome to What's the Data Point from Citizens Budget Commission and Gotham Gazette. I'm Ben Max from Gotham Gazette.
I'm Maria Doulis from the CDC.
Thanks so much for joining us. As Maria said, we're very excited about an episode on energy policy. The Green New Deal, renewable energy, all these things are big topics of discussion in New York and nationally. We're looking forward to digging in today with an expert on the subject. Before we get to that conversation, just quickly, if you've missed any of our prior episodes, you should find those in your podcast streams at What's the Data Point or at the Gotham Gazette or CBC websites. You can give us feedback. You can find our email addresses, of course, but also Twitter is always easy. I'm at TweetBenMax and Maria is at Maria Doulis. Let us know what you think of certain episodes, ideas for topics and guests for the future. All feedback is welcome, but be gentle. But today, we are digging into energy policy and very much looking forward to this conversation as Maria helped set the stage with several data points there. And today's guest is Seth Hulkauer, Principal of Strategic Energy Advisory Services. And Seth is an expert on energy policy who was recently commissioned to do some research for CBC for a conference on the most important fiscal and economic issues facing New York that was held in December. His presentation is available online at the CBC website, and the panel discussion from the event on energy will also follow this discussion as the next episode in your podcast stream if you really want to dig in. But we're going to have a really great discussion with Seth here. Seth, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
So before we talk about where New York is right now, where it's heading, a lot of key information, just tell listeners a little bit about your background.
Sure. And first, Ben, I'd like to thank you and Maria for inviting me on to talk about this. I'm very excited to be here today. My whole career has been in the energy industry. I've started off designing and building power plants and transmission networks. I was developing power plants overseas in China, Greece, Morocco, India, Costa Rica. I followed my international work by staying close to home and working on a local project, managing first the takeover of Lilco by the Long Island Power Authority, and then I stayed as the Chief Operating Officer of LIPA for almost 10 years. Since leaving LIPA, I've been consulting, and now I get to consult on great projects like this one for the CBC.
Very good. Wow, I feel like I have 15 questions I want to ask you about your career, but we'll stick to the topic at hand here. So, for those that are not as familiar with energy policy, maybe a brief overview about how the state gets its energy and uses it?
Sure. New York is blessed with the largest hydropower resources this side of the Rockies, but otherwise we import all our energy. Over a third of the state's energy is natural gas, and a third is petroleum products. The biggest difference between New York and the rest of the U.S. is that there's almost no coal in the mix. New York has less than gets 1/10 of its energy from coal. In the U.S., the average is 14%.
So what makes up the difference in New York?
In New York, the big difference is made up by natural gas.
And is that something that just happened because of New York's natural resources? Was that a policy decision? How did we get there?
That was largely driven by policy matters and also by economics. New York made a conscious decision to move away from coal. This was one of the goals that Governor Cuomo had announced several years ago, and they followed through on it, and the coal plants have been shut down. But we're seeing coal going down in usage across the country because natural gas prices have come down so much. with new natural gas supplies, largely the result of fracking across the country, that it's all being driven down. So coal really can't compete in New York State.